Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning. I'm sure we've got quite a few people in already. I'm sure we'll get a few more people joining us in the next few minutes. Welcome to a briefing for what's happening in the world about COVID-19. We've done several of these since March, and it's always reassuring to see how many people are genuinely interested in what's happening outside their organisation. So it's great to see so many of you joining us this morning. And I also want to say thank you to the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, who have helped us put this on, and most of you, I think, will probably be joining because of their prompting as well. So thank you to them who continue to be interested in helping us share this out. I'm going to hand over straight away to Richard, my colleague Richard, who has been more than knee deep, up to his neck in data for what feels like years, has been months now, and is going to take over and share the latest insights with you this morning. So I'll hand over to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Roger. Is the audio okay?
It is for me.
Yeah, perfect.
Do use the chat, everybody. If you want to put any comments in or questions, or also if anything isn't quite working. And Richard, don't worry about it. I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through this.
Excellent, thanks, Roger. Well, as you can see, and have already seen, there's About Loyalty. We're Roger Lawson and Richard Spencer. And I think, as lots of you probably already know, but I think About Loyalty is all about working out how people feel and how it influences what they do. I mean, that's what we strongly believe, that how people feel influences what they do. And the more we can sort of research and investigate that, the better we can understand people's behaviour. And obviously supporter loyalty is core to this, that kind of innate loyalty that people have for their charities. But also external factors are really important in terms of influencing how people feel. So the stuff that's going on in the outside world, the stuff over which you have very little control, but can in fact influence what you do. And that's why we've been tracking sentiment, because actually that's terribly important. Yeah, About Loyalty is Roger and myself, but it is also a whole host of charities. Many of you here today, I can see, because as part of that exercise, if you like, in terms of investigating how people feel and how it affects their behaviour, we work very closely with lots of charities. We do collaborative research, investigating people's behaviours, people's emotions, and then working out how to interconnect in this whole roster of fantastic charities who we work with there and have worked with. So I want to talk now about the tracker, because obviously if you're going to look into how people are feeling in the general public, you need to do some pretty robust research. And what we do is, on a weekly basis, we do an online survey of a nationally representative sample of 2,000 UK adults. The fieldwork usually runs from Friday through to Sunday, and we've been running that now since March the 19th, 2020. So we're now in our 36th week, which is quite something. So as you can probably work out, with research now around 72,000 people. So that volume of research points gives us a huge opportunity to provide a real nuance in depth and statistical robustness to the insights that are coming out. I'll just also say that each week we look at the look at all the data, all the key trends, what's happening, publish those in reports to the charities who we're working with on this. And they get those reports on a Tuesday morning, and then we have a workshop every lunchtime on a Wednesday, at which we look through those different insights and identify, what's happening, what are the key outcomes. And I think critically, the main thing then is, what can we do about it? What's some recommendations? So some of the topics that we look at, there's demographics, obviously, the practical impacts of the pandemic, how people feel about lockdown and restrictions and how it's affecting them emotionally. Lots in there around how people are feeling. Consumer confidence, that's becoming increasingly important. And of course, a reasonable amount on charity support as well. So much is changing so quickly. Now getting on to go just a tiny little bit of context. So if that's the research, and that's the research we're conducting on a weekly basis, I think weekly is really quite important because stuff is happening and changing so quickly. This is just a selection of headlines over the last few weeks, going from will we lock down? We will lock down. Will businesses close? Won't they close? Will there be a vaccine? Won't there be a vaccine? Will unemployment rise? Are things going to be okay? There's a huge amount going on, and I mean, even just yesterday, the Prime Minister saying 'tis the season to be jolly careful, having only weeks ago we were talking about will we even see each other at Christmas. There's such a lot changed, but we know this, and I think it is worth saying, because even though we know there's been a lot of change, we've got so used to it, it's quite easy to forget how much is still going on, and it is changing a lot, and that's changing for us, and it's changing for all of our supporters. We had we were at the conference, or the Chartered Institute had a conference on Monday. It was the Insight Special Interest Group conference, and Becky Harris from Shelter, she explained that they're using this research across all of Shelter, and it's been really important to provide that kind of objective framework, because and put yourself firmly in the shoes of the public and your supporters. I mean, from personal experience, I know, and we all know, I think it's very easy to get swayed by subjective opinions of your peers and colleagues and friends and so on, and it's also, you know, I find I can get tied up in sort of personal and professional echo chambers where these then become actually sort of truths, if you like. And so this is where an objective and external view can really help. So that's kind of really been our goal, is to try to have a completely external objective view of how are people feeling out there, how are people feeling about the world, their lives, the outlook for the future, and in particular how that translates into charities and charitable giving. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through a few of the highlights, some of the key points that looking back over a few months, but I think focusing more on the last few weeks, last 3 or 4 weeks, and then looking ahead a little bit and thinking about what might come to pass. So, how are people feeling today? We ask a question, which is about how optimistic do you feel about the future? And this is net optimism, so it's all the people who are very, very optimistic, and you subtract all the people who are very pessimistic. So I guess you could say the good news is that it's net positive. Back in March, it was very low. It grew over the summer, spiked through Eat Out to Help Out. It collapsed when the meetups restricted to groups of 6 came in, and it's kind of bumbled along a bit ever there since. You could say that's an interesting pattern, but this pink line at the top, is if you look back over the previous sort of 4 years, that's through Brexit and all sorts of external world crises. Net optimism in the UK has been hovering around 40%, net 40% for the last 4 years or so. So what we've got is a hope gap, and so people need hope. You know, this sense of like we've got something to look forward to. It's just not there at the moment, and so we can look at that blue line and think, oh, things are fine. But actually, compared to where we would normally be, there's a gap there, and it's important to know that people might not be able to articulate it themselves in that way, but it certainly exists as a kind of a gap between what people used to feel and how they're feeling now. Similarly, we ask a couple of questions about civil society, really. So this is about how the pandemic is bringing communities together, and how we'll come through this stronger as a family, as a nation, as a planet. It's really about that kind of coherence of society. And again, we've seen erosion of those measures. I see this chart, and I often think of the boil a frog kind of analogy, where if you pop a frog into a boiling water, it will jump out, but if you pop it in cold water and gradually warm the water up, it won't notice the water's heating up and will slowly boil to death. And it's kind of what's happening here. So these are very slowly eroding. And again, what that's created is this kind of hope gap, where when you're feeling very strongly supported by those civil society values, that creates a sense of hope and faith in the world around you. But when that's missing, you might not notice that it's not there, but it does exist for people, and it will be affecting how they're feeling. What else is going on? This is remarkable. So this is we probably know it in our hearts. This is it in a chart. People don't believe the government is going to get us out of this probably quickly, or maybe even at all. right at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody needed a clear leadership, this is what we're going to do, trust was high, but it's simply just fallen off and fallen away ever since then. And again, that kind of 14th of September as a point where everybody went, you know what, a bit fed up with this. One of the things we're able to do with when we've got so much volume of responses is we're able to kind of slice in even more fine layers of time, if you like. So when the Prime Minister made the announcement on the 31st of October that there would be a new national lockdown, we took out 500 responses immediately after that, that announcement to see what happened. And in fact, that is what happened to net trust in the UK government immediately following that announcement. It just, again, it fell by a further net 10%, which is a huge fall. I mean, it's phenomenal in terms of how low that fell at that point. But the point here is really that government's not going to get it out of it. So what role can charities play? And especially thinking back to that kind of hope gap. So to kind of piece each of these pieces of insight is sort of part of the jigsaw picture. So they all fit together, and we'll hopefully kind of paint a bit of a landscape. So what next? How are people feeling? A whole range of things. So I'm going to show you 3 charts now, and they're all kind of asked in the same way. So this is the degree to which people agree with this statement. And so it's those who agree, and we take away those who disagree. So if it's 0%, there's 50% people who agree and 50% people who disagree. So if this was 0%, half of the population feel on edge and out of control. Not so great, and in actual fact we've seen that gradually rise over this period. So we're seeing that kind of feeling start to go a bit more on edge and life's a bit out of control. We didn't ask this question for this middle period when there was through the summer, and because actually there was it was sort of in that period when the restrictions were really quite relaxed in general. But what we've seen, this sense of people feeling trapped, has started to really increase again since the 14th of September, since that kind of groups of 6 point. And again, this is gone up again following the English the second lockdown, if you like, in England. But again, these are important feelings not to kind of cast aside. And also then this idea of feeling lonely and isolated. And again, it's more than half the population saying, yeah, I agree, this is making me feel lonely and isolated. So there's a whole, people are agreeing with many of these statements. We know what creates well-being. So it's that sense of competence, I'm able to do stuff, relatedness, feeling part of something, and autonomy, which is I'm able to take control of my own decisions. And these statements in particular show that they're low, especially in autonomy and competence. So that these things are being taken away from people. We also asked people what headlines they think they're likely to see in the coming weeks, and the one that's come through top every single week has been mental health and depression increased by 20%. So this is a fictional headline, but it's the one that people believe in their hearts that it's the most likely to come through. So people are anticipating kind of a low mental well-being. But things do change quickly. They do change quickly. So we've seen some good news with 3 vaccines that have proven to be effective. We've seen that there's optimism for the English regions with lockdown about to be lifted. Although for some regions, actually, those placed in the higher tiers may not feel particularly different. As I say, but things do change quickly. And on this chart here, this is just looking at how people feel generally about life. Not to worry too much about the detail, but again, this is to show that it changes quite quickly. So this went from -7% to -17% and back to -7% again. And this is around that October 31st announcement. And really, so people are incredibly sensitive to what they're seeing in the news and what's going on out there. So it's just about how do we, if we know where people are feeling and we know that it's changing quickly, what are the things that we can then do about that? So what can we do? Unfortunately, there are very few things that are capturing people's attention. So that previous chart there, it talks about how people are feeling on the scale of terrified to fine. That chart comes from this one here, where what we do is we break that down and say, well, okay, which aspects of life are you terrified about, and which aspects of life are you completely fine about? And the things that people are completely terrified about, it's political unrest in the NHS, the planet, and then look at that jobs, economy, world economy, economy of the UK, the stuff that's like kind of fairly fundamental to a lot of people, and in some respects out of their control. And the things that people are fine about, actually, it's the stuff that's getting largely in their control. And then if you look at what people are prioritizing in their lives, it is, again, it's their health, it's family and friends, mental well-being, money and finances. So it's very much those core points about what's going on for them. So I think if we're thinking about how we're creating communications with people at this time, it's really important to know that's where people's brains are at the moment. And we also ask, if you're the Prime Minister, I mean, we should be making this available to all the political parties, but this is what people are caring about at the moment. Or maybe we shouldn't, because the answer is possibly but focused on things that, as a charity sector, we would hope that people would be more focused upon. So all of those things, look at the bottom end, we've got gender equality, race equality, sustainability, climate change, food waste, local communities, better schools, affordable housing, all the things at the bottom and at the top. I guess it's no surprise. It is the economy, it's healthcare, it's the vaccine for coronavirus, and it's unemployment. Good to see reduced hunger, homelessness there. But again, people's brains are very much focused around those core impacts, those core immediate direct impacts of the economy and healthcare. So if you're thinking about, again, about communications, it's to think very carefully. So if you wanted to talk about gender equality, race equality, sustainability, climate change, it's very important to understand where those fit in terms of where people are prioritizing those. So if you're going big and strong on some of those messages, and solely and in a focus, maybe it's not going to have so much cut through for people at the moment, because again, we're finding that very few things are focusing people's attention at the moment. I just wanted to hand over to Roger, because he's got a great example really of how this can work well. So Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I just think this is interesting because the RNLI are not an obvious sort of COVID-19 charity. They're not one, when you think about COVID-19, they're not one of the ones that immediately come to mind. And we've seen one of the part of the tracker tracks people's attitudes and likelihood or intention to support named charities. And we've seen perhaps the obvious ones in there around aged, around health, to some extent homelessness, really the ones that people are most likely to say that they want to support at the moment, and some that don't have that immediate link to COVID-19 are lower than they would have been before March. I think RNLI, you would think, fits into that category. It's not an immediate one. People aren't out as much as they used to be. They're not at the beach as much as they used to be. And I like the approach they've taken. Now I have to couch this, in fact we haven't seen any results of this, but you saw on a previous slide just how important family and friends are to people, and that's one of the real priorities that people have put forward in their lives this last year, and the importance of family and friends. And this is the RNLI Christmas appeal this year, and mail on the left and email on the right, and you can see that the two different case studies, but absolutely focusing on that sense of family, that sense of connection, both of them from a parent telling the story of their child that they're incredibly proud of, but also worried about and want to bring them home safe. I just think as a way of taking your story and putting it into the mind frame of the recipient of it, someone for whom family is as important. I mean, gosh, it's important all the time, of course it is. But this year, it's so important to all of us. I just like the way the RNLI have framed their story to meet something that is emotionally connecting with their audiences.
Excellent, thank you, Roger. Yes, it is a good example of how, if very few things are capturing attention, how do you do that in a way that's authentic? Because obviously that's absolutely critical. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, Roger and I kept stumbling across examples of, I'm not going to name and shame, but they weren't authentic ways of presenting charities in the light of COVID-19. It felt a bit ambulance chasey, to be honest. But this is a great example, and we'd love to help others do more of this. Okay, so here we go. Fragile consumer confidence. There's no doubt that consumer confidence is very fragile. So at the moment, and this isn't a chart, this is some words and stats, but around 56% of people on furlough are worried that it could turn into redundancy, and we've got to think about 10% of the 10% of people who are at work are on furlough at the moment. So that's a lot of people. And okay, so it's worried as well that so they may not become redundant, but they're still worried that it is. This is how they're feeling. 39% of people believe the company, and this is everybody, believe the company they work for is really struggling as a result of the COVID-19 situation. 65% of people believe we're heading for a massive recession, and 40% of people believe that they will personally be massively affected by recession. So there's a lot of people who are currently in the view that they are they're vulnerable, and their consumer confidence is fragile. And people will have seen this chart before, and it does come with a caveat. But this is a question of regular givers saying, how likely are you, what do you think about stopping charitable donations in the event of a recession? That's the question. Should probably have put it on there, but for some reason it's not there. And it's tracking this over the last 8 months, really, so over the whole of the pandemic. And we're seeing that a constant around 23% of regular givers say they plan to do this. Okay, yes, there's a 50% say not in a million years. So half the people aren't going to do that, but we've got maybe a fifth, a quarter of regular givers saying that they plan to stop all charitable donations if there's a recession. And then there's a lot of people on the left there who are thinking that's actually pretty likely. Now, the caveat is that, yes, we don't believe that this is saying that charities are going to lose 1 in 5 of their regular givers, but the point is it's how people are feeling, it's where they are. And I think we had a workshop a few weeks ago, which was about how you might approach supporters, offering them regular gifts, paying regular gifts and things like that. And actually, whilst that's an important part of an ongoing relationship, maybe while people are feeling like this, maybe this isn't the time to kind of go out with the launch of a kind of a pause your regular giving product now, because people might be feeling not quite in the right place for it, or too much in the right place, should I say, and they might actually feel that it's an itch that needs scratching. But when they come to think about it, actually they've not weighed up all of the kind of important aspects of their commitment to the cause, what they want out of the charitable relationship, and they're kind of just knee-jerk reacting to where they are in the present. As I say, having that mechanism of being able to pause a regular donation is and ought to be an integral part of that relationship. It's what people would expect from many of their financial relationships these days. I've actually got some extra research which we're presenting on tomorrow afternoon, covering some of that as well, which is around how people are feeling around their relationships with other organisations other than charity. And of course, the good news is people still want to give, and I imagine that most of you who are watching today, who are working at charities, are still seeing that people are giving generously. Just thinking back to the Trust in UK government, all started about the same time, and Trust in Charities has maintained that level up there. So yes, some fluctuations, but it is broadly moving between 35 and 40% there, which is high and positive. We've also seen this is what people claim themselves. So the number of people who said, yes, I made a charitable donation in the last 7 days. Yes, it dipped at the beginning of the pandemic, and we all saw that. And then towards the end of April, which was Captain Tom Moore's 100th birthday, there was a huge spike. And then actually we've fallen away a little bit, but it's still being maintained at very high levels. And anecdotally, we're seeing that people still want to give. So that's definitely a positive and open door for charities, if you like. And a powerful story can make all the difference. So Roger talked about RNLI. This is the Royal British Legion, and yes, of course, Remembrance Day is something that almost transcends any one charity. But here, the Royal British Legion, as you've seen, this is showing the net likelihood of donating to this charity, and this is in the context of coronavirus. So this is looking at the net likelihood of donating to the Royal British Legion, but over that last 2 weeks in the run-up and post Remembrance Day, there is a measurable and substantial uplift to their net likelihood to donate, which is incredibly positive for them. So ultimately, of course, charitable support won't be driven by what is going on in the world. It will be driven by what people believe is going on in the world. It's how this makes them feel. And what we're seeing is that sentiment continues to fluctuate really quickly. And we don't actually see that stabilising anytime soon in particular. We don't know where the economy is going, and this is going to affect things as well. So as we go through the next couple of months, the furlough scheme's been extended to the end of March, but who knows what will happen when we get to the end of there. And we've got vaccine headlines and maybe some positive news about cases and hospitalizations in the NHS. But at the moment, it feels like there's a lot on a knife edge, and things aren't good in terms of well-being and optimism. So we might feel things are better, a little bit better, but actually compared to what we used to, there is that hope gap. So that's where people are, but even so, it still hasn't affected giving. Giving is still, it's been really positive. And we've seen signs, as I say, that like a big push, like we showed with the net likelihood to donate with Royal British Legion, or tapping into things like family can make a substantial difference. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's going to come up, I'm afraid, but there's a fear of a recession which could hit optimism more than vaccine might lift it, for example. And we don't know what will happen post-Christmas when we go into January. And it's important that we do keep an eye on how people are feeling and how it's affecting what they're likely to do. So I think maybe two key things really are you have to know quickly how things are changing. And that applies to appeals or events, campaigning, volunteering, services. You really need to know how people are feeling. And I think there's a key one as well, which you really need to be able to respond quickly. So we've seen some great examples of processes being torn up over the last 8 months and doing things in a new and flexible way. So I think there's more of that will be important as we go forward. So if you'll just indulge me for 1 second, the tracker, the work that we've just been presenting to you, yes, it's research that lots of charities have been involved with, and you could also be involved with it as well. And we can tailor this work to your charity. So you could join us on a weekly basis and join us with the workshops and the reports, or we can pull together, based on our 72,000 responses, a tailored report for your charity to just let you know how this is going to be affecting your supporters and your sector. So that's all about favourability of different sectors as well. So we've got a whole section looking at how important, say, international development is as compared with coronavirus. And one of my frustrations is that that's been negative the whole time. Obviously, all the health charities have really benefited, and we've seen their relative importance sustained. But there's so much that we can do with huge amounts of data. So we'd love to be able to help more charities. So if you're interested, or to join or to contact, find out how you can get, we can tailor some work with this work for you. Do get in touch with us. But I'll stop there now. And I think we're going to move into some questions. Roger, do we have some questions?
Great, thank you, Richard. And just we are at 8:30, so if people want to leave, that's absolutely fine. But we're very happy to, excuse me, to stay around and answer questions if you've got it. I'm going to. First of all, some of you will have seen in the chat, Lucy Barnett from RNLI has commented. Now, I would say I didn't know Lucy or anyone else from RNLI was going to be here when I so was looking for sycophantically put the RNLI video up. But I'm glad she's put in the comment that the results have started well. So fingers crossed on that. Lucy, if you are still listening, we were sort of chatting semi-privately about another video you did around people saying thank you for saving their loved ones this year. And I've had a question in the chat to me privately saying, is there a link for that? If quickly you know where it is and you're able to post a link to it in the chat, that would be fantastic. Thank you, because I think people would love to see that. And again, that sense of family coming across in such a, as Richard said, authentic way is brilliant. No, I think it's brilliant.
Hi, Roger. Just to say, I will be. What I'll do is, if you, I think I got an email through from yourself for joining the link for the invite today. So
yep.
I can share a link out if you'd like.
We can forward it on, can we?
Yeah, no problem.
Sure,
it was shared on our website and on our social channels, so I don't see that being a problem to share that.
Brilliant. It was, yeah, super. That would be great. If you could let me have it and I'll forward it on, that'd be fantastic.
No problem.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Just before, if we put questions in the chat, please, if people want to. I just thought, Richard, there were a couple of things that stood out to me in what you went through. The concept of a hope gap, which I take as opportunity, that people want to feel good again. And what a fantastic opportunity for us as a sector to be able to fill that gap when the government and no one else seems to be.
Yeah, and I think one of the great ways one of the great ways I've seen that hope gap being filled is with regular good news communication. So every charity has up its sleeve stacks of good news, and it may be good news in the form of case studies, successes. It could be good news around supporters, around staff and volunteers, but there are good news stories. Every charity has heaps of good news stories, and they may have been told before, but now's the time to tell them again, or to tell new ones, to find new ones, to reach out to your supporters and find those good news stories, because that's where there's as Roger said, that is an opportunity. It's people are looking for that, and it may not be something that they would write into you and say, oh, I'd like some good news, please. But it's there. It's this kind of latent need to fill that hope gap for people. And again, that's very tactically. It could be done in a tactical way, in a tangible way. But it also could be done, as I say, provided it's within the frame of what people are thinking about it. It could also be done as part of your mission and vision for that hope for a better future. But if provided it's framed in ways that will resonate with where people are at the moment. I think if it's too far off from where people are, it'll just like skip over the surface. But again, so it's around how can you put in place a regular programme of good news for supporters, fill that hope gap.
Great, I couldn't agree more. There's a question from Paula Langston here around whether we have any insight into how long the impact to income will last even after a vaccine is available. This is crystal ball time, I think. Richard, do you have any thoughts on that? I've got a couple which I can.
So, gosh. Well, if you look through the media and think about when is the vaccine likely to be available, so they're testing one now. There's talk of spring. Add 6 months to that, and will it be this time next year when there's a viable vaccine? That's, I don't know. I'm doing a dangerous thing, which is being somebody with a small amount of knowledge, and yeah. So that's the first point. Is, well, when will the vaccine become available? We don't really know. And then how long will the impact to income be? Yeah, I think there's a different question first. The impact will be on consumer confidence, and the impact to income might not necessarily, as we said in the chart where we're saying, 1 in 5, 1 in 4 regular givers say, if there's a recession, I'm going to stop giving. But that's not necessarily, we're saying that's not necessarily going to happen. I think the challenge for charities is to say, well, actually, what can we do to reinforce and strengthen the relationship with the supporters that we've got now? What are all the things we can do? And filling the hope gap for them will be one of them, and to prevent any loss in income, I think. So it may, yes, there will be shaky consumer confidence. Some people will choose to cancel some of their charitable gifts. The challenge is really, I say, thinking about how do you now really tend to those people who are who you need to keep them. We've said it before, but one of the people we work very closely with, and I think I saw them here today, said if we've got to look after our warm supporters now, they're the ones that are going to pull us out of this. So it's all about retention at the moment. It's not all about retention, but to protect your income, there's going to be a big part that's going to be about making sure that those supporters who love you now stay with you and aren't swayed by sort of that kind of how they feel about the outside world.
Yeah, I think for me, there are so many factors other than just the COVID-19 virus that will affect whether people are giving. The reassurance I still see all the way through is that you pointed out, Richard, is that people still want to support. But of course, in many cases, they can't. One factor of that will be either real or perceived financial problems that they have. Another is just the fact that we can't get out and give people the fundraising opportunities that we did. I mean, events, we all know, have been hit massively. We can't go out and be doing face-to-face and things like that. So it is. I don't think it's just about the vaccine in itself won't be the answer, but it might be one step along the way for us. I think that sense that people want to support is the bit that gives me some reassurance behind all of this.
We've got some more questions in both in the chat and the Q&A. There's a question here for filling that. If you're going to fill the hope gap, would giving or volunteering make the biggest difference? Do people feel stronger from giving their time or their money? That's a great question, and the cop-out answer is it will be different for different people, which I think we know. Yes, it's going to depend on the type of person who we're talking about in terms of filling their hope gap. But I think, who was I talking to? I think it was Richard Turner I was talking to. I don't know if you're here, Richard. And we were talking about how, about that giving in any way being a really important part of the supporter experience. So giving people the opportunity to feel competent, able to help, giving people out that sense that I'm able to make a difference. Just offering that at all is an important thing. And we considered what might you do if you wanted to flip that on its head, and so if you wanted to just completely destroy the supporter experience and make it as rubbish as you could, one of the things you would do is just make it difficult for people to give their time or money. And I think stopping asking for money would be a good way of worsening the supporter experience. Obviously, the way you ask is really important, but I think it's impossible to say which would make the biggest difference. I think the biggest difference overall is to stop asking people for their support. So the hope gap is filled by offering people an opportunity to feel competent, autonomous, and connected, and it's that sense of being part of the solution. And I think people will choose for themselves if it's about time or money. Don't stop asking. Do it nicely.
Shall I come in on the question around here if there's anything that's come out about international or development humanitarian aid at the moment,
Yes.
which is basically, Richard showed the chart that shows some of the charities who are in a stronger position and in the way people feel about them since COVID, and some charities at the other end. I'm sorry to say international development is at the other end. We tracked that all the way through the DEC appeal and saw the DEC appeal have, to be honest, very little impact on that. Richard showed the British Legion example where Remembrance had a big impact on people's sort of positive feeling towards them. We didn't see that. I think it's one of those where, and even last week, I mean, it's a very political conversation that's going on at the moment, isn't it, about the 7% or the 5% for DFID. I think we're struggling to see those stories really having an impact. And I think that the answer is we're not being tangible in the way we're talking about the difference we're doing, the difference we're making.
I'll just put up that chart with relative importance of cause. So you'll be able to see now. We're asking. So this, I did refer to this. We ask about. So this is very much framed by this particular cause as compared to COVID-19. So So let's take the one at the bottom there, arts and culture. So we ask people, take arts and culture, put it alongside COVID-19. Is it more or less important now? Is it more or less important? And then we come up with, some people say it's more important, some people say it's less important. We give it a net score, and then we plot that change over time. So we can see there that the health, elderly, disability, homeless, children's charities, all seen as more important when put alongside COVID-19. As a group of which are kind of in the middle, which are around animal welfare, local causes, environment, and military, armed forces. Although it's interesting to see how environment has been one of the few charities that's made some headway. And then there's a kind of a third tier where we've got overseas aid, disaster relief, sport, recreation, religious organisations, and arts and culture. They're all down in that sort of bottom third of group of charities, which are seen as less important now when stacked up against COVID-19. So in particular, we've got, what we're able to do is we could take, for example, the that overseas aid and disaster relief line, and we could then look at the people who are saying, because there are still some people who are saying it's more important now, although they're in the minority, and there are some people saying that's less important now. And we could go into details of those. So as I say, if people are interested in, we can dive into these data in more ways and provide more tailored answers to questions, but obviously not on a forum like this morning.
Richard, sorry, I'm going to ask you to go back to that presentation. Just there's a question that Anne Shinkwin has asked around people's willingness to take part in events and activities, and I know we in there we've got the question around how willing people are to engage with charities in various different in-person ways, so shops, events. Is that the same presentation? Can you jump?
It's not.
Is it a quick thing to jump to that slide?
Is it quick? It's
so while you're looking for that, I'll just come in on a couple of others. Here, there's a question that's come in saying, has average gift size changed? I don't know the answer to that. That's not something we track in the tracker. So I mean, if people want to use the chat just to share their experience of whether their supporters' gifts size is changing, then please do. But I'm sorry, we're not in a position to answer that directly. Just anecdotally from some of the people we speak to. What else isn't that? Just try to sort through the chat and Q&A. Have you got it? Good, thank you.
I didn't see the question. Happy
So the question was taking part in events. So the thick blue line, which is right at the bottom, is your willingness to participate in mass events such as a marathon, half marathon, etc. The thick lighter blue line is take part in a fundraising event in my community, like a bake sale or coffee morning. So we can see that they're both. I mean, there's nothing that visiting a charity shop sort of for quite a long time sort of sneaked above sort of net zero, but certainly lack of willingness.
And there's a few factors at play here. So one of the factors is that September the 14th point, where there were new restrictions came in around groups of 6, and I think that held back people from doing things. So I think that kind of made people a bit more reticent. I think when the schools all went back, that had an impact at the same kind of time. And of course, now we're heading into sort of much colder and shorter days. I think the idea of going out is becoming less attractive and less appealing for many. And of course, the last month of those additional restrictions in England will have had an impact. So I think there's a number of factors in play there, but we did see some gains over kind of the early summer, but we've kind of since lost those over time.
Thank you. Is that the one where if you go forward a slide, you see it broken down by that shows there are still roughly 10, 15, 20% of people that are still willing to do pretty much anything?
Yes, as I said, yes, but actually it's interesting. We've seen that. Yeah, it's about on average 10% across all activities of people who say, yeah, I'll be happy to do this today. It's something I'll be happy to do today. So there are people who are prepared to do that. But actually, in the last couple of weeks, we've started to see that fall off. And again, I suspect that's to do with the weather and impacting on people's how people are feeling about getting outside.
It always amazes me just how dreadful things can be, and you'll still get some people that are kind of prepared to do something. Or yeah.
There's a question here on regional. So yes, we do have regional results, and we're looking very much at because obviously the restrictions have been different in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. And I think what is interesting is that as we move into December, I think the idea of Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, England being homogenous certainly in terms of restrictions, it might be well, because Scotland's having its own different sort of five-tiered protection system in place, and England's going to have a 3-tiered system in place. I don't know what Wales and Northern Ireland have planned, but it's going to be more around communities. Some communities are going to feel very open and optimistic, and I think other communities will feel really quite down in the dumps because they're still going to be feeling as restricted as they've been before. And we've already seen through some of the earlier lockdowns the sort of like that them and us mentality that emerged around which regions are going to go into tier 3 in England in particular, but also between some areas of Scotland and England. And again, I think we're going to see probably more of that coming away.
Right. I'm going to pick up on a question from Anna Foley in here, which was, has the research been able to show people's inspiration for charitable giving, i.e. Coming up with different ideas and the relationship between optimism and inspiration? And actually, it's difficult to draw that directly from the tracker there. But I was a lead on the Institute of Fundraising's Insight conference on Monday. If any of you or your colleagues went to that, or you can still sign up for it to access. Two things on that. One is Macmillan did a great presentation on how they're doing similar tracking to this. They're doing it in-house and using some of this for them and their innovation team. And their innovation team created 9 different test activities on the back of the insights that they were getting, and you can see how they've used it to create new ideas in there, which is great. And the other thing is, if you are signed up, because all the presentations from Monday's session are still online, so if you want to sign up, you still can do it through the Chartered Institute of Fundraising website. But also, if you want to know how Scope and Shelter have used this report, there's a presentation from them as well on how they've applied some of this in terms of their direct fundraising campaigns work as well. Gosh, still lots of questions here. We're just about to launch a climate change campaign. I'm very pleased to see the importance of climate environment has increased. Any advice on how to best increase giving to climate change campaigns? I think my immediate response to that is that twofold. I mean, both of which are going to be couched in the frame. It's going to be difficult. One is that creating the climate change campaign and framing it in a way that's going to create cut through at the moment is going to be difficult. We know that COVID-19 is directly related to the way we engage with the natural world, but there's a big step between that and the big step between that and people understanding that, and there's an even bigger step between that and people then understand the link to climate and things like that. So it feels a very tenuous link. And the other factor for me is that people are really struggling to think long term, even with a vaccine. The good news of the vaccine, people are just not thinking beyond what they're going to do next week at the end of the England lockdown, what they're going to do for Christmas. And so some of these sort of long-term issues are really difficult to create cut through. I think it is about bringing it back to the things that we know people do care about at the moment. What are the immediate impacts we can do? And that sense of family, that sense of connectedness, that sense that we're all in this together, maybe is something that can come across, as well as make it tangible, make which has always been the problem with not just with climate change, but a number of different causes. I think it's about making the cause and the impact we're having tangible, which I'm sorry isn't easy. Richard, as a former RSPB person for many years, I know you approached it by, I mean, RSPB, that link is a big campaign organisation and works globally, but make it relevant. I mean, you were lead in launching the Homes for Your Back Garden campaign, which feels a million miles away from climate change, but actually it was all about taking the big issues and making it relevant for people in their everyday lives.
Absolutely.
I think I don't need to add to that.
We couldn't add any more. Only that I don't know. We've talked about RSPB before as well in these sessions, and if anybody's seen these before, then you know what they did around Big Garden Birdwatch and translated it into like a breakfast birdwatch. So it's while people were at home in lockdown, it's just finding those opportunities to still speak to your own kind of organisational truth and be authentic, whilst actually recognising where people are and what they need at that time. And one of the other things is that at this time, you know, again, Roger and I were talking about this maybe yesterday or day before, and that you know if we're supporters are part of our team, our charity supporters are part of our team, and actually a team that performs well is generous. You know, we're generous with each other, we're supportive of each other, and actually, yes, our supporters provide give time, money, and voice. But I mean, what are we giving to them at this point in time? And it's how do we offer them the support that they need? And I think as we go through the next, certainly as we go through December, there will be a wide spectrum of how people are feeling, because some people will be allowed to meet up in many households and go down restaurants and pubs and bars and so on, and there'll be other communities that are feeling very, very trapped and lonely and isolated. And actually, as a charity, there's a real challenge there in knowing how. It would be impractical to say, well, you need to work out and know, where all your supporters are, where they're feeling. It's impractical. So it's about being scrutinising everything that you send out and making sure that actually, if is this going to work for somebody who's able to go out and enjoy their life, and is it going to work as effectively for somebody who's feeling trapped and lonely and isolated, because your supporters are going to be in those situations as well. I mean, many of your supporters will be beneficiaries, but it's about really putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what that spectrum looks like.
We're edging towards 9 o'clock. Rich, can I just give you one more question to answer quickly, and then I'll wrap up afterwards. Which is, I think that was the question. Yes, if you can answer that, and then we'll move on. No, I think I've covered them all, but there's a question around the demographic factors. What demographic factors are there in people's readiness to give? If you've got any lines, just share on that very quickly.
So I'm reading that as in the net likelihood. So absolutely, yes, we're finding that it's pretty similar male female, and so we do ask for a full set of gender identities, but the volumes in anything other than male and female are so low that there's no real statistical significance to draw from that. But it's pretty even across those who identify as male and female. And age-wise, it's yes, that those people in the older age groups are much more likely to give, and it's also those older age groups who are well, actually there's a bit of an overlap. So as you go from young to old, the likelihood to donate goes up, and as you go from young to old, the sort of my consumer confidence increases. There's this gap in the middle, there's this age group in the middle, sort of the 30s 40s, where there's where it's kind of it's not quite optimistic enough in terms of my consumer confidence isn't quite strong enough, so there's still some fragility there. But also there maybe the kind of ones who are teetering on the do I or do I not give as well. So the younger end, you've got people who are consumer confidence is low but they're unlikely to give. At the older end, you've got people whose consumer confidence is relatively high and they're more likely to give. And then there's a group in the middle, I think a large group in the middle that where it's on a knife edge is probably the best description.
Right. Thank you, Richard. I'm going to draw it to a close. I'm amazed just how many people are still with us at the moment, and given we've overrun by 25 minutes now, and but it's great to see the engagement and that. So the last question here was: is there a way to get updates on these statistics on a semi-regular basis? I mean, we will continue on an ad hoc basis to put on sessions like this and share the learnings. But I think if you don't mind just picking up on the sort of last bit in what Richard talked about. Join us. The research is happening every week. And I'll be blunt, the more people that join in, the more we can afford to bring the price down for every charity that takes part. So if you are interested at all, drop us a line and we'll talk you through what's involved, and we'll more than happily talk to you about that. And if you've got any other questions, drop us a line anyway. We're more than happy to pick any of them up offline and carry on talking about this. You can tell from what Richard's been talking about in the Q&A, there's a lot more data behind this. So if there's anything we haven't answered, then get in touch. But otherwise, thank you, Richard, for all you've done putting that. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope that's useful, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you everybody for turning up. Really good to see so many people here, and thanks, Roger.